Peter Christensen in the house. Navigating the change of the real estate landscape as an agent. Anyway, Peter's going to be talking to us from Utah Central Association of Realtors. I'll make you introduce yourself, tell us all about your family, your life story. I think I knew Peter's parents long before Peter was born, I think. It's a scary thought. His dad was an art instructor at the junior high school right around the corner from my house. And then the rest is history. But love this guy. He was formerly the chief legal counsel at UAR. And then he came on down here. How many years has it been? It's been a few. Wow. Guys, this is a big deal to have Peter Christensen with us. So without further ado, Peter Christensen.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks for having me. It's always fun to come to KW. I'm not really going to tell you about my family stuff. I don't think that's really what you want to hear today. But I am Peter. I've met most of you. Been here 8.5 years. I now have been here as long as I was with the UAR, which is kind of crazy. So 17 years with the realtors, and it's been good. I'm a local kid, born and raised in Utah County, and was commuting past the UCAR building to get to the UAR for those 8.5 years I was working up there. So happy to be with you still. You guys haven't run me out yet. Okay, so lots going on, right? Lots going on. Where do we start? So first, I think you guys know this. I initially, there was a lot of maybe people's heads exploding a little bit with the announcement of the settlement and what does it mean? What is it going to do? I think we've all kind of calmed down and realized it doesn't change that much about what you do, right? It changes a little bit how we talk about it and how we approach things. And so you've heard, I'm sure, a lot about the settlement. And settlement at its core is an MLS policy change. That's the big result from the settlement. And then that trickles out to affect a few other things about the way we do business. But it's not a legal change. Could we see legal changes? Maybe. But really, at its core, it's taking away that BAC. Right, so that will, so let's talk about timing. As of August 17th, that's when it officially has to go into effect. So August 17th. And you'll likely see, every state will handle it differently, but you'll likely see the changes kind of introduced a little bit before that. So from an MLS standpoint, I think I'm hearing they're actually going to put some of these changes in place at least a week before then, maybe a couple weeks to try to work the glitches out. At the forms committee at the UAR, we're working on releasing some of those forms probably mid-July latest, so that we can get you trained on them, you can get used to them. So what does it look like? What's the big change? Well, the big one is the BAC's gone, right? Effectively, they've taken the most transparent, efficient way of us working with commissions, and they've taken it out and said we can no longer do it this way anymore. As of right now, and I'm going to say as of right now a lot, because the settlement is not fully approved by the court yet. And so could it change? It could. It's received preliminary approval, and we've seen other settlements approved by the court. And in those settlements, we've seen the court say, hey, we really like these changes along with the proposed NAR changes. And so it's feeling like the court is happy with the terms of the settlement, but we will see if anything else changes.
Why are you implementing the change before the settlement is finalized, like in November?
Good question. Excellent question. Yeah, why are we changing anything before the final settlement? It has to do with the way class action suits operate. Once notice is given out to the class, so we've probably all received those postcards, right? You're entitled to $2.70 as a member of this class, and you get that. Once those go out, that's the date when, if you're not compliant, that's the date going backwards, you're covered by the settlement. And so even though it's not fully approved by the court yet, because it's received preliminary approval, they send out those notices. Earliest they can send them out, August 17th. So they've said, once those go out, you're not covered after that. So if you continue operating in a way that the court has said was not okay, then you are subject to another lawsuit, right? And so that's why it's just kind of a weird mechanical issue with the way the courts work.
So there's not going to be a rush of attorneys trying to go at and get people in the past in other states and stuff like that.
Kind of already has been,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, they do that the second they smell the blood in the water. They do it. And we had a copycat lawsuit in Utah already. And right after the settlement was announced, right after the verdict was announced.
We were named actually as one of the
Yeah.
brokerages.
Yeah. And so the way that works, I mean, if you read the lawsuit, literally they copied and pasted most of it from the initial lawsuit. So it's lazy legal work, but all they're trying to do is establish their case to get a piece of the settlement money as attorneys. So it doesn't really give the parties, the plaintiffs any more money, but the attorneys get in on it because they're the first to file.
So they're going after the attorney that originally did this and trying to get a piece of the pie.
In a way, they're just trying to, they know the settlement will be global. They know the settlement will cover all of the United States. And so if they've filed and they can show they filed before the settlement was final, then they can be subject to it and they can take a little piece of the fee that's out there. So kind of the ugly world of class action, mass torts. But yeah, so good question. But that's why we're all targeting this August 17th, is that's the day they've said, past this date, you might not be compliant or covered by the lawsuit. Okay, so August 17th. So the big changes, obviously, BAC gone. The other big one is buyer-broker agreement will now need to be signed before touring a property, or an agreement. And there's been some confusion about this. An agreement, what does that mean? Could it be, why did the NAR go out of their way to say it does not have to be an agency agreement? Well, I can tell you exactly why. Because the NAR is dealing with 50 states and several US territories. They all have different vernaculars, different terminology, different situations. So in Utah, what do we know? Agency or no agency. I mean, we're pretty simple that way. And so that's why we talk about it in terms of an agency relationship, an agency agreement. The Division of Real Estate really has not recognized any sort of middle ground. So I know in Idaho they have a customer versus a client, and they have different terminology. We don't have that in Utah. So the NAR, when they pointed out, we didn't say agent, it had to be an agency agreement. They weren't saying, nah, it shouldn't be an agency agreement. They were saying, you fit whatever works in your state, so you can be compliant with your state regulations. And if for your state is not called an agency agreement, then we're not going to say it has to be an agency agreement. In Utah, the way the realtor organization is focusing on it is an agency relationship, an agency agreement. There is talk of, well, would a showing agreement, I suppose that might comply with the settlement. And questionable under Utah law. Big questions whether that still creates your fiduciary duties, still starts your fiduciary duties, whether you can contract out of those. was talking to UAR's lawyer yesterday, and I don't read it in the law. There's one time you can contract out of some of your fiduciary duties. Limited agency, right? But it's stated in the law that you can do that. There's nowhere else it's stated, yeah, you can represent a client, but not really owe them fiduciary duties. So in my mind, you're probably picking up all the fiduciary duties with a showing agreement as you would with an agency agreement, but you're getting a really weak promise back. So I don't know. I don't think I know the forms committee is not going that route.
I just go by myself as an agent.
If you went not representing a client,
Correct.
so you just went through a house yourself.
Yes.
No, yeah, you wouldn't need an agreement to do that.
And I can just pull up my FaceTime phone, and happen to have somebody else.
So they have said
Don't
virtual
do that.
showings. The NAR did clarify this one. They've said virtual showings count as a tour of the property. So you would still need technically a,
Like I'm just representing myself.
right. What's that? I mean, if you're looking at it on your own, if you're posting it, you might be okay, but yeah. Well, we got it.
We need black and white.
I know, right?
I'm sure it's talking about open houses and not only
Sure,
our listing.
sure. So it was not your listing.
It's not my listing. I have somebody holding my listing open. What discussions have been done around that?
If you, this is the first time, so I'm going to talk off the top of my head, which I should never do, because it's probably all subject to change. But I would think you would want to establish a relationship with the listing agent and with the seller to sit and you're really representing them in a way because you're conducting the open house. And so at that point, it's clear in the settlement, you can, as a representative of the seller, show properties without an agency agreement to buyers. But you're doing it as the listing representative, right? So as long as you have that relationship established, I think you're okay. The second you start going into representing that buyer, you're going to want to get that in writing now. All right? You don't have this middle ground, which, by the way, I think I've been teaching for 17 years. Get those buyer broker agreements signed early. And if you read Utah law doesn't say anywhere in Utah law that as long as you get it in by writing an offer, as long as you get your agency agreement signed, you're compliant. It's silent on the timing. It's just that the Division of Real Estate has interpreted it that way, has only enforced it. I won't even say interpreted. They've only enforced it. They've kind of drawn their own line in the sand at when you show or when you write an offer, you have to have it. If you don't, you're going to get fined past that. But before that, they've just sort of ignored. But Utah law doesn't say when. It just says it says for purposes of describing the scope or defining the scope of your relationship, you'll have your agency agreements in writing. To me, you can interpret that to say when you create that relationship. So we'll see how that gets interpreted long term.
So how's that gonna affect us if, we're doing an open house and an unrepresented buyer comes before?
You could still, okay. So if you're doing open house on behalf of the seller, unrepresented buyer comes in, I think you're still smart to ask that magic question. Are you working with another agent? No, I'm not. Okay, I can show you around on behalf of the seller. I think you always want to make it clear. I'm representing the seller, and that's my job here. Could that turn into a limited agency situation later? Sure. But when you initially tour the property, show them the property, you are a listing representative, and you've made that clear up front. I don't think you're out of compliance at all. That's under your listing agreement, right? Your duty, your relationship with that seller.
Okay, so, I sell houses for, consumers, houses and things like that.
Okay.
And,
I think you would just transfer
Yeah,
at
you-
that point after that, like right now I'm representing the seller, but I'd love to have the opportunity to interview for representing you. Like there, I think you have to transition into I hear helping the seller.
Right. And you're really covered by the agreement with the broker, right? A listing agreement covers the whole brokerage
For representing the seller.
for representing the seller. Yeah.
You can specify if it's a single property, that property only, that would be representing the buyer.
Yes.
Not commit to you, but you're a sub-agent until you see it.
What about when working as a referral broker? Or say I work as a referral agent and I'm working with a broker who would sign all the signatures, but I'm allowed to do it just about everything else except put my name on paper. If I'm not able to put my name on paper when working with a new buyer to show them a new home, how would I disperse that?
Yeah, in this referral brokerage at KW Westfield, you would not be showing homes. And so we can have a discussion offline, but you may not do any real estate related activity in this brokerage, in our referral brokerage.
I was unaware.
Okay, but let's, like I said, let's talk offline on that.
Amber.
So I was just gonna say, to Aaron's point, like, I think if you have to be really careful to say, like, if you're doing an open house for me, not for my own open houses, if you're doing an open house for me, you have to be really careful to say if you're representing the seller, if you're really not, if you're kind of sort of, like how that fine line between, you don't have a contract with the seller either, right? And so that you're doing this on behalf of the seller, you're doing this open house on behalf of the seller, but you're not really representing the seller, you're looking for buyers, And I've heard in some states, they actually have to like post a sign at the door that says something like, I represent the seller, or I'm an agent doing this open house, but I don't represent the seller, so it's very, very.
Mm.
That's just all.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that more. How often does this open house agent, but how often are they not within the same brokerage?
Oh,
They're all in the same brokerage.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's
That-
good. That's
People-
cleaner.
That would fall under the, we're gonna do anything that the brokerage and
Yeah.
the agent deem appropriate to sell your home.
Right. And so as of now, our listing agreement covers the whole brokerage.
But if you kind of shoot yourself in the foot if you're trying to get buyers and you say, I represent the seller, because then you think, oh, they represent the seller, I don't want them to. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
maybe how does your,
That, yeah.
you have to be careful how you approach it.
Boy, you guys are coming up with good scenarios. This is good.
And it's something that we deal with daily,
Yeah.
probably here, because we don't do limited agency here. So at the end of the day, we really are letting everybody else, well, he does limited agency, we don't. And so
Right.
we're allowing others to show and try
Yeah.
to source a buyer for our listings.
Yeah.
It's happening a lot for us here, and we've had discussions, I wanted your take on it.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, this is kind of first impression for me. But the rule says that when representing a buyer and touring a property with that buyer, you have to have a written agreement before you tour the property. But then it also says you can show the property to prospective buyers without an agreement when you're working on behalf of the seller. And I think we're getting a little caught up in the language of representing, because your whole brokerage represents that seller in a way, right? Because they're Dean's client. Yeah, technically. Dean's never met them, never talked to them, but they're Dean's client in a way.
And you don't want them to meet me.
So I think I feel like you're covered under that. It's just and how you work that wording to say, I could represent you, should it come to that. And I mean, you could let them know, hey, a different agent's assigned to the seller, but I also work for the same brokerage. Let me show you the house. And I at the end, if you're saying, hey, if you're interested and you want representation, give your pitch there. I feel like you're covered in that scenario without having a specific buyer agreement by then. Because you're really doing it for the seller. Because you would show a buyer with an agent, wouldn't you? No.
Let me jump on the other side here, because my understanding is that part of this lawsuit was about the listing side, setting a price of the commission, and that was somehow price fixing. Is that going to change in the future? Or what?
It potentially does, because really what they did is eliminated the BAC, and that was why. And their big beef with it was, as I understand it, was that a seller and a listing agent were setting the compensation for a future buyer's agent, regardless of who that buyer's agent would be, their competency level, their experience, how well they did in the transaction. They're setting that, and the buyer's never setting it. So that was the kind of the crux of their argument. And so by eliminating the BAC, and the other big thing, so we haven't gotten to all of it. The other big thing is that now once you get that agreement in place, you as a buyer's agent are capped by what is in your buyer broker agreement as far as compensation goes. So if you have $500 in there, but the listing brokerage is offering $15,000, you're capped at $500. And that's their way of fixing what you're mentioning. That's their way of saying, well, this way, it's still, the buyer's agent still has to negotiate their worth with their own client, rather than this third party setting their compensation before they've even met them. So that's,
But the listing agent is not going to be penalized for saying, we're going to give a 3% commission.
No. No, so they've made that really clear. A listing brokerage can still offer cooperative compensation under the settlement. They just can't advertise it in the MLS.
So basically, we just call the listing agent and say, what are you offering, and put that on our agreement.
You probably have your buyer broker agreement already signed by then. And yet to be determined how listing brokerages handle that conversation.
So we say 3% or less.
No, 3%.
Is this fun? Guys, I absolutely love this conversation. Our time is up, and so we're gonna say thank you. Keep just getting going. We haven't even talked about DC yet. However, we're gonna end it, but I want you to, this is one of those, stay tuned. We have so many questions, and they're great questions, but we don't have all the answers, and that's part of the hard part. We're throwing softballs at this guy, but the problem is we don't know where the field is as we swing away and hit. And so we don't know if it's to be inbounds or out of bounds.
Yeah.
I was reading stuff yesterday, even that said to the effect, there should be no brokerage to brokerage compensation. It should be the seller writing it to the buyer. That's just somebody's opinion. And I'm just going, oh, you're kidding. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Anyway,